Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. Dani Korman, you are the assistant swim coach at University of California, Berkeley. You've gotten a whole day to rest and recover from the NCAA meet before you were subjected to this questioning. How are you doing, Dani?
I am good. Like you said, catching up on that sleep and getting back on West Coast time, but excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. What did you think of the NCAA meet? What's fresh on your mind? You've had that whole 24 hours to sort of decompress. So what's at front of mind when you think about this NCAA meet you just had?
Yeah. I mean, overall, I think as a team and especially myself, we're just grateful we got to go. You know, after last year, it was a pretty big letdown a few days before we were supposed to get on a plane. And so we just tried to really keep that mindset all year, not knowing if the meet would happen, but really just keeping our focus on that. And again, our message the whole weekend was like, let's be grateful we're here and have fun. And again, I think we took advantage of that, and we're really proud of our final finish of fourth. We had a national champion relay and a lot of lifetime bests, a lot of season bests. So we're definitely walking away with our heads held high and really excited for the future as well. We have 14 freshmen coming in next year. And everybody at the meet is returning next year. So again, we're just excited about the overall performance and how we can grow moving forward.
Yeah. And talk about like an uncertain season. Like, I'm curious for you guys, at what point in the year did you feel confident that there would be an NCAA meet to go to? Like, what, do you have a date, sort of a rough date when you, because I was hearing from people like in late January, early February, there'll be no NCAA meet, right? So that's not like, there were definitely people out there that thought it wasn't going to happen. When did you feel confident that meet was actually going to take place?
Yeah, I think it was more around Pac-12s. We were pretty confident, even though Pac-12s we weren't confident about until the week before when we were going to Houston. Yeah. But the NCAA did relay messaging that they were going to make a decision about 30 days out. And so it wasn't going to be a last minute call. Okay. But again, there's always that chance you get there and people test positive and you can't compete. So I don't know that there was ever really like 100%. I mean, every day you're getting tested every other day at the meet, and thankfully there were no issues. We actually made it the whole season without one positive on our team. So we're definitely going to take that as a win. But yeah, I mean, I think about a month out, like once we were at Pac-12s and, you know, the championship manual comes out and all that, and things were starting to come together, I think we were pretty confident. But again, the whole year we were really focusing on it. So we tried not to let the indecisiveness or not knowing consume us too much.
Okay. So that's interesting. You say like the whole year you're focused on it. So, you know, let's say, I don't know what the first day of your season was, but you know, August, September, somewhere around there. Do you and Terry sit down with the team and go, hey, we don't really know whether there's going to be an NCAA meet, but like, this is Cal and this is the meet that we're focused on. How did that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a team conversation. We were doing Zoom meetings all summer, and we really didn't know when we would be allowed back on campus. So we officially were able to start about the second week of September is when we had the whole team back and cleared to participate. But that was our talk, is kind of like, all right, if we're going to do this, are we going to focus on NC2As or do we want to focus on something else? And pretty much the team consensus, like you said, Cal being Cal, like we wanted to focus on that meet. And again, there's steps along the way that get us there. That wasn't the only thing we were talking about. There had to be, you know, great workouts and when can we compete leading up to it. And there's still Pac-12s and you got to qualify. So there's micro steps there, but, sure. Yeah, it definitely never left our minds that NC2A was the place we wanted to be at the end of the year and give it our best shot.
Great. So, you know, you said second week of September, was when you got cleared to come back. Give people an idea, like, you know, Bob, I'm over here on the East Coast, and I think while everybody's had a shared experience through COVID, the way it's played out, specifically in sports, has been a little bit different everywhere else. So what are some of the hoops you had to jump through just to be able to have a collegiate season at Cal this year?
Yeah, so the big thing is just making sure we're staying on top of testing. I mean, it's great. We're getting tested once a week, so we had to make sure we're staying on top of that.
Is that an athletic department wide, like every team, or okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And they only brought back winter sports. So football was back, obviously, and then fall sports came back, and then they decided that seasons weren't happening. So they sent those athletes home. So it was pretty much winter sports. So us, men's swimming, there was some track and field, cross country around, and then football. So it was a smaller subset of the athletic department all fall. So they could manage testing, and we did symptom screener every day. We had to get wristbands. Our cohort size was only 25. So for us, we were fortunate we could practice as one group. But it was still tricky trying to get long course training. We started short course because we have more lanes, obviously. They didn't want us sharing lanes. And then once we were in the clear for a little while, we were able to do long course. So that was nice. Our weight room was outside all year, so we didn't have typical lifting going on. They moved some racks and some dumbbells outside, but you couldn't have a partner to start with. So lifting all year looked very different. We typically would do like spin and dance and other things that we just weren't able to do this year. Dry land wasn't really approved until January, and even then it was a very different looking dry land because we couldn't really share equipment and things like that. So there were a lot of protocols, but again, we stayed safe the whole year. So we're excited about that, but definitely looked very different than past years.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I was just thinking about, you're right. It's got to be tough logistically to do something like spinning in this environment. Like, it's not as if you could just move all the bikes outside and, get everything plugged in. And I know that has been a big part of your dry land program in general. And of course, like lifting presents its own challenges, right? If you can't do anything with a partner, obviously you can't do anything that involves somebody spotting you in any way. So you probably have some adjustments to make in that regard. Were there any kind of other, in terms of the swimming practice, you talked a little bit about, that long course was a challenge. I'm even thinking about, like, I'm staring out at our pool right now. I'm thinking about the fact that we have people starting on either end and how the heck that would work outdoors in a long course pool with people on either end trying to sort of keep things organized. But were there any other things in swim practice in general that, you sort of big adjustments you had to make over the course of the year?
Not too much. I think, again, the starting the other ends was like, there were little things that would pop up that you didn't really think about. So Terry would run one end, I would go to the other end. And then again, like I said, eventually we could all get to the same end. I think we did a good job of adjusting. So nothing really stands out too much in terms of practice. I think the biggest thing was, like, we couldn't do in-person meetings the whole year. And that's a big part of who we are, is, getting together 10 to 15 minutes before practice and just hanging out and talking and stretching. And we couldn't use rollers because you couldn't share anything. And we didn't have locker rooms all year. Like, the girls had no locker rooms.
Show up in your suit and get in the water.
Yep. Yeah. Show up in your suit, you swim, you put your clothes on, and you walk out.
Yeah.
So, I think that played itself a little bit into, like, just the practice culture, because it was, you come, you swim, you go. And so logistically that was the biggest difference. But in terms of, like, a specific workout, it wasn't too different in my mind. Again, it was only my second year here, so I only had 1 year prior. But that's where I think Terry did a great job of just, pivoting when we needed to, and, telling the team, like, here's where we are, here's what we can do. We're not going to focus on what we can't do. And so I think for me, nothing really stands out that we couldn't do, because I think we just did the best with what we could. Yeah.
Is there stuff, like, you talk about having, you want to have meetings, you want to be able to talk to the athletes. I think a lot of people know Terry as somebody who, works a lot on relationships with athletes, and is very good at developing that relationship, being encouraging, challenging people, all this kinds of stuff that you might do in that, as you say, 10, 15 minutes before practice, 10, 15 minutes after practice that you're not doing. Were there any advantages that you saw to doing some of that stuff virtually? Like, is there anything we can carry over to an era where you have those things we used to have back?
Yeah, I think the fun thing over the summer is we have little family pods that we do. And I think knowing that things were going to be different, we integrated the incoming freshmen a lot earlier. And I don't think they'd ever really done that in the past. So I think that's something regardless, I mean, it'll probably be over Zoom because they wouldn't be on campus yet, but I think that's something that we definitely want to do earlier is integrate our incoming freshmen. I think that really helped the culture once we could start swimming and be together as a team. And then also just, I think Terry and I, we ran the meetings and we just felt like we were talking at them. So we got creative with them running the meetings. So I think that's another thing that we definitely, whether now it's in person eventually or virtually, like I think passing some of that off to the team. I think we found some leaders in areas that weren't expected, I think I would say, in terms of either creativity or engaging others. So yeah, I think there are things here and there that we definitely can carry forward, either whether it's in person or virtually.
So, I asked you off the top some of your thoughts about NCAAs, and I'm joking about how little time you've had to sort of process that. But give me some insight as to what kind of process you guys are going to use as a team. Like, how does it work at Cal when you want to evaluate? A season's over, right? You want to have some kind of like look back before you start moving forward. What kind of processes do you guys use to do something like that?
Yeah, I think, again, right now we're still kind of in the take some space, and everybody I think needs a process a little differently, whether it's a day or a week or a month or whatever people need. But I think this year is a little different too, because we have a lot of people, looking towards Tokyo, and that looks very different for a lot of different people depending on, the country they're going to represent or where they are in terms of trials. And still we have some people that, we have a girl who was a national champion on a relay who is still trying to get her trials cut because she hasn't been able to swim long course in 2 years.
Wow.
So, I think right now, not to say that we're not going to evaluate. I think we are. I think it's just going to look very different depending on who someone is. And it's more on an individual level, I think, right now, since everybody's path is a little different. And then I think, and probably I would say a few weeks, we'll come together as a team and, do some of those debriefs and look where were our strengths, where can we improve, and what are we going to take forward. But again, last year we didn't really get to process because things just kind of ended. And this year we're going to process, but it looks very different because, this year our NC2A team, only 4 people had ever been to NC2As prior. So, 3/4 of our team, this is all they know about NC2As. So that's where we got to rely on, even myself, have to rely on Terry's expertise, because this was my only, experience with Cal was this NC2As. So I think there's a lot to learn. And again, I think the debrief is going to look very different for everybody, but that's where, it's not a blanket, program. We want to work with everybody's individual needs. And so we'll do that. And then we'll come together as a team and kind of put the pieces together. So we, like you said, move forward into next year.
You said, one of the things I want to pick up on there is you said this is your first experience this past D1 NCAA Championships. Obviously, you were a head coach at MIT. You went to D3 NCAAs every year. You were coaching at Johns Hopkins universities. You were at NCAAs, I think, every year during that. And as an athlete, you were at NCAAs every year? Is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you went to a lot of Division III NCAA championship meets. You have a lot of those to compare. What stuff, because I was a D3 athlete too, like what stuff struck you as, okay, this seems like what I recognize in it as an NCAA meet. And then what kind of stuff was like, whoa, now this is different. This is D1 NCAAs. Like, what were some of the things that fell into those two categories?
I will say I did get to go to Division I when I was at Yale with Eva Fabian.
Oh,
so
I've missed something.
No,
I forgot something in your resume.
I only say that because that was the last time it was in Greensboro when Cal won.
Okay.
And so I was more or less in the stands though. Eva was awesome, but she started the mile. So we were up watching, but taking in the meet. So I was there, but in a very different capacity.
Sure.
But again, I think it's just the excitement of a meet. Like, again, this year was different. We were sitting in the stands, but you could definitely tell, like, just the excitement of, not that D3 is not exciting. I loved it. And it is just a little different feel. But again, I don't know that I got the full feel this year without fans in the stands. That was the biggest challenge, I think, this year was us making our own energy and being up top. But just the times, and I think it was really this year just about racing. and, just getting your hand to the wall. And, again, nothing like glaringly sticks out between like a D3 NCAA Championships. I mean, there's no men at this one. That would be the biggest difference.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So there's that.
And you probably went to some as an athlete before it was split, right? I mean, you're about the same.
They were together all 4 of my, or split. Yes. All 4 of my years. And then they combined it once I started coaching.
Yeah.
So kind of being split as an athlete, together as a coach, and now back as a coach split. I do think that plays into some of it, but again, I think overall, like, it's just an exciting meet. And I think, whether it's Division I or Division III, I mean, I think people are there to perform at their best. And so that's your job as a coach to make that happen regardless of what division it's at. And again, I don't know totally still what a big D1 meet looks like with a bunch of fans and Cal, parents and fans going crazy. And I'm excited to see that hopefully next year. But nothing really stands out as like a huge difference. And maybe that's just me taking it in, but I think just kind of me more being in the moment is what's important. And it's obviously, a little quicker meet if you're a D1 women's meet than D3 meet, but not, that's exciting and it's fun to see. But again, I think just being in a place where people are ready to go and excited is what's fun. So,
you mentioned off the top, I think you drew a lot of positives from a 4th place finish. I know that there are plenty of people out there that could say like, well, 4th place is a disappointing finish for Cal. You're probably one of the only schools in America where like somebody could consider 4th place disappointing, right? What do you do? Is that something that you guys even think about, that you feel like you have to address, or do you just go like, look, guys, this is ridiculous. Like, you can't win or get second every single year. Because, I think when you're from the outside looking in, there's a perspective too, where somebody from a less successful team would go like, well, it's all just like, roses at Cal, then they just cruise right through to NCAAs and everybody swims fast and goes. And your chuckle lets me know, like, of course it's not like that, right? There are struggles as well. And, I can just assume that as a team that has won a lot of NCAA championships, there does come like a certain amount of pressure to perform at a high level. How do you address that as a coach? How do you see Terry addressing that subject with the team?
Yeah. Definitely not a disappointment. I mean, I think we're all incredibly grateful that we got 4th. Of course we wanted more, but I think that's also just going to fuel us for the future. We've been 15 years now in the top 5, and we were the only team to get a trophy prior to COVID and a team to get a trophy during COVID. So, I mean, I think we definitely can hang our hats on that we were, second the last time there was a meet and 4th, and the other 3 teams didn't have a trophy. And so just there is still that consistency, again, not everybody had the meet they wanted, but we had a lot of highlights and we just got to focus on that. And we had a national championship relay and we had half our team go lifetime best at the meet. And, I think focusing solely on 4th isn't going to get us very far.
No.
We try, there's that dichotomy as a coach is you want to preach it's just another meet, but also it is the final meet. And so I think we just need to keep that in mind that we can't define our season on getting 4th. Yes, it was like we talked about earlier, it was a big focus on our year. But if we're just going to say 4th was a disappointment, I think we're negating the entire year. And I think we learned a lot this year. We were challenged in ways we never thought we'd be challenged. And I give the girls credit, like we kept fighting until the very end of the meet. And, a relay DQ, I think set us back. But as we said in our meeting, like everybody pretty much went a lifetime best on that relay. I mean, Isabelle Ivy went 49 for the first time in her butterfly split. Staden was like just off her best in the 100 back. Emma Reich was right on her best time. And Emily, I mean, even though she went early at the end, like she was pretty much on her best time. And so we just have to look at those things. And I think sometimes we get too stuck on the negatives and forget the positives. And so I really think that's the message like Terry kept trying to give is like, look at the good stuff we're doing. People might focus more on the 4th place finish because we are Cal. And that's part of the, the burden of being great is you're going to have that expectation, but we also just got to use this to rise up from it. And again, I think our goal next year is, again, to improve. And I think we learned a lot at the meet. And like I said, we have a lot of talent coming in. And I think if we can just share this experience with the team next year, I think we have a really good advantage going into next season.
I actually have an apology to make. In regards to your relay DQ, and I probably shouldn't even be admitting this on air, but I actually taught Emily Gantris how to do a relay start.
We'll have some words. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we were at. I have to tell you, like, Denmark as a country has probably the lowest collective like knowledge base about relay starts. So I was on the coaching staff at the 2015 European Games. Emily was there on our national junior team, and we put her, I think, like second on an 800 freestyle relay. And she very sheepishly pulled me aside, and she just like, I don't know how to do a relay start. Like, I don't know how, I've never done a relay start. I don't know how to do a relay start. And I said, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. Like, because we were there for 5 days before the meet started. So it's a story I've told many times in my life, that people can get to a very high level without figuring stuff out. And I'm pretty sure Denmark won a short course world championship in the 400 medley relay once with their breaststroker doing a grab relay start. So again, it's not a country. So any bad vibes that followed from the relay DQ, I think, psychological. Well, you could just use it. You could just blame it on me. You could just say, like,
okay,
if Chris hadn't let us down, guys, we would have won. No, but I do think, like, momentum wise, like I was watching the meet, and I'm completely biased. Like, one of the reasons you're on here is because I'm a fan of Cal. Okay. I'm a huge fan of Terry. I'm a fan of you as a coach. We've only met a few times. It's not like we're friends or whatever, but I've learned to be a fan. I've overcome my own jealousy over your career path, and I've learned to become a fan. More about that later. But, like, and I said this on a podcast I was recording here. Like, I was 100% all about Cal. So I'm watching the beginning of the meet, and I'm like, they could pull this off. They're swimming amazing. And I do think I could tell that the swims that came after the relay probably were not as strong as the swims before the relay. Now, the swims before the relay, like, you had people swimming out of their mind. You had the relay national champion. What do you do coaching wise? Because obviously, like a relay DQ is a gut punch when you're at a meet. What are some of the things you try to do when something like that happens at a really big meet to try to keep as much sort of forward momentum as you can?
Yeah, again, I think it was just focusing on their relay splits. Like I said, it was an incredible relay. It was our best in all year, and, trying to keep it on that. But again, I think some people stepped up after it and could keep going. And I think some people, it's been a long year, and I think physically we were good, but I think emotionally it was a roller coaster year. And I think it just kind of came out a bit at the meet of people, I think, were more emotionally tired than physically. And it's not an excuse. I think it's just something that, again, a lesson we learned. We need to know how to manage that better. And something that we can now have a very, upfront and hard conversation about. Because that's something Terry's all about, is that we're not going to leave an elephant in the room. Like, we're going to talk about it. And I think, again, some people are going to need to have that conversation. And I think as a team, we just need to have that conversation of how can we better as a team rebound from situations like that? Because I think, like you said, some people did, and some people, I think, can do better. I think Terry and I can also, have that conversation with ourselves and as a staff of how do we help manage that better. But again, I think it's just a learning experience. Not blaming anything on Emily or that relay. It just, it's a matter of fact of what happened. And like I said, I think we can move forward from it and learn from it. And I mean, we were talking at the meet, Abby Weitzel did the same thing her freshman year on that relay. She jumped and DQ'd the relay, and look at Abby now. Right. So it's not going to define anybody's career. And so how can we just take that experience and be better from it?
You mentioned some of the athletes on here, and I do want to ask you about some of the athletes that you had that just like have had an incredible year. Obviously, Isabelle Ivy, she was Pac-12 Swimmer of the Year. Talk about her development. What has she done to improve and swim so well in her time at Cal?
Yeah, I think she's grown a lot. She came in her first year halfway through the year. So her first NC2As, she was only at Cal for a little while. And then last year was, an exceptional year where we didn't get to go to NC2As. And I think just really seeing her grow as a person, not just a swimmer. I think, COVID taught her some other areas of who she was. And I think that year really helped, Izzy be Izzy at Cal. Yeah. And I think it helped her training in terms of she was a lot more consistent this year. She wasn't, afraid to lead the practice and get out in front and, take advantage of opportunities. And I think it's more Izzy just knowing more about herself now and coming into her own as a person. And I think that's really transcended her into her swimming, and she's getting more confident and she's learning ways that she can, keep pushing herself, but also she always wants more. Like that last relay where she split 46-1, it was amazing. And then she's like already ready for I want to be better. Right. So
I got to get that 45. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is awesome. I mean, be happy, hang your hat on that. But again, so I think she's done a really great job growing in terms of that balance of knowing when it's time to push and knowing when it's time to be happy. But again, especially in training, I think her consistency was a lot better this year across all strokes and willingness to kind of do whatever she needed to do.
Yeah. All right. I want to switch base and talk to you about your own sort of coaching journey here. And I told you before we started recording, I wasn't going to go into the full bio, but I am curious about a few things. And I said I would circle back to my jealousy. I mean, part of what I'm just jealous of is you've gotten to work with basically all of my idols. So if we start with George Kennedy at Johns Hopkins University, what are some of your biggest takeaways from that experience? Obviously, that was early in your coaching career. What were some of the biggest things you took away from George?
I think the biggest thing was, for him to have been coaching as long as he still is coaching at Loyola.
One of the most overqualified.
He loves it.
Non-head coaches in the country.
Right? I don't have to do paperwork. I just go to practice and go home. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
But I think his ability to balance being a coach and being a person and being a dad and a husband and a son, just seeing how well he managed that. And that's what he said, that was the way he stayed in it so long, is he had that balance and he modeled it really well for the team too. You can't just be a swimmer and go to school, especially at a place like, Hopkins or an MIT. You got to have a life outside of that. I mean, anywhere, to be honest, but especially at places with that academic, and that's their focus. And so he would do the same thing. And he would, when I was there, his daughter, Catherine, she was a senior in high school. So it was her last year home. So he wanted to go to every lacrosse game that she played in, and would leave me to run workouts. And so also just, instilling that trust in me as an assistant, I think allowed me to see how much buy-in that gives someone in a program. He's not just giving me workouts and saying, here, do this. He's like, Dani, I'm not going to be here. You write the workout. Let's collaborate on it, but you're going to be the one running it. So if something, you need to modify, I want you to feel confident in that. And so he just, gave me a lot of responsibility coming in, and especially the men had always excelled at Hopkins and the women were always, placing lower. And, the year after I left Hopkins was the year the women won every relay. Yeah. And so at NC2As, and that was pretty cool to see. So I think, again, it stemmed to George just really setting a great example of that balance of, yes, you're a coach, but there's other things you are, and just modeling to giving responsibility out and, take accountability for it and things like that. But he was just a great role model in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I wonder what was your perception of him before going there? Cause you swam at Kenyon, right? And I guess more so on the men's side, but in that time period that you swam at Kenyon, Johns Hopkins was the other school that was constantly threatening to sort of upset the streak, right? So what kind of as an athlete, what kind of perception did you have of him as a coach? You're just oh, that's the guy who coaches Johns Hopkins, or what did you think? What did you expect?
I didn't know too much. I'll be honest. I leaned on Jim Steen. So I had coached at Carthage for 2 years. with Greg Earhart. So got a lot of good exposures when collegeswimming.com was starting. So I was cold calling all those profiles that are now a thing. Yeah. I was that person cold calling to set those up. So I got to know some coaches that way, which was pretty cool. But when I knew I wanted to continue in coaching after I finished my master's degree, I called Jim Steen and was like, where would you direct me to apply? And he knew that George had an opening at Hopkins. So it was really more, to be honest, Jim Steen directing me that way. But of course I valued his opinion. And then once I got to know the program, and of course I knew the school, but I didn't know it too much from, I knew it from a swimming perspective, but I knew it more from an academic perspective. Yeah. Because again, the women were good when I swam, but I think the men were more of the competition, and it was a split meet then, so we didn't see too much of the men. Right. But I just knew it was a very reputable school, had a strong swimming program, and for me, that was the path that I knew as a coach I wanted to take, and so it just seemed like a great fit for me.
Yeah, and I think, if I look at your coaching resume, you've coached at if you just look at the U.S. News and World Report list of top universities, you've coached at a lot of them, Dani. Was that purposeful? Did you seek out places that just forget about swimming academically? These are just world-class institutions that you worked at. Was that valuable to you in some way?
I think it is. I think especially being at Hopkins, that's something I learned. And George was great about learn your non-negotiables as a coach. And I think one for me that just became important while I was there was I appreciated their life outside of swimming, and knowing their careers that they would have once swimming was over. And so for me as a coach, that just became something I got very invested in. And I also, for me, one of my big values is to keep learning, which is why I'm at Cal now. And so I think I just really do appreciate the athlete that values that educational part of their experience and has goals, obviously the greatest goals in the pool, but also are they valuing education or clubs and things like that outside of the water. I think that makes them a more well-rounded person and prepares them for life, after school.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about making that leap from MIT. You've become a head coach of a combined men's and women's program. The team is just again, my biased opinion. The team did amazing while you were at MIT. You had a lot of success. And a lot of really high-end performance at the D3 level. People that despite pursuing something really sort of tough academically and all the restrictions you have in Division III, basically performing at a Division I level at MIT, right? And I think, people who don't, I grew up in the Boston area, people who maybe are not from the area, might assume that MIT, oh God, it's so easy to coach there. You just get everybody you want. I know you're doing the chuckle again, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's actually a very, very challenging place to coach, right? Because, they really value, they have a really strong value of stuff that will come before sports, right? You got to be successful at this, and then we can be great at sports too, and they have done great. But what, you're in that position, you're a head coach. Theoretically, as successful as you were, you probably could have continued doing that for as long as you wanted to do. What motivated you to want to come to Cal? You said learning, but was that it? What really sort of pushed you to go for something more?
Yeah, like you said, I was happy at MIT. Obviously, it had its challenges, but I personally envisioned myself being there for the rest of my career. And then when this opportunity came up, it was kind of in the back of my brain. I just wanted to explore it. And that's kind of was my idea all through my coaching career. And it's clearly not over yet, but right. I just wanted to look into it. And once I came out and saw Cal and met Terry and met the team, I just knew if I wanted to keep growing personally and as a coach, I couldn't pass this up. And I credit my athletic director that I had at the time at MIT, and she asked me a bunch of questions and to help me, really analyze, is this something that I want to do? And, the biggest one is she said, is this opportunity ever going to come up again? And I was like, I can't for certain say that it will. And so she really pushed me to look at that hard. And once I got to know Terry more, and I'll be honest, I didn't know too much about Terry before I interviewed. You know who she is in theory, but I think just getting to live it, and it always seemed like this far off land, cow swimming and all of this stuff. So again, once I got just a few days there, I just knew like this was something that I felt I needed, and something, it was going to be a challenge for me, and that excited me in a different way than the challenges I was having at MIT. And who knows where this will lead to next. But for me personally, I just felt like this was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Yeah. You talk about, like you didn't know Terry that well. And I think there's plenty of people, just because of how much she's accomplished in her coaching career. And so she's a well-known name, right? There's probably a lot of people who have an idea of who Terry Mckeever is, but they don't know her. I wouldn't say I'm like somebody who knows her super well. I've talked with her again a few times and exchanged some emails here and then. I'm more of an admirer than a friend. She's sort of my idol, but like what is for people who are from the outside looking in, what were some of the things that that maybe people don't know about Terry that you've gotten to experience on the inside? Shareables, like I understand probably some of this is private, but what are some of the things that it's actually like versus maybe what people are looking at from the outside and perceiving things to be there?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and something we talk about a lot on the team in general, is just, she always has the best team's interests at heart. Like, we're always talking about assuming positive intent, and she knows that, like, sometimes, she can be tough, but that's who Terry is. But we have conversations like she's tough out of love, and she's never, like, she's not going to push that to a place where someone's going to break. I think she does a great job of knowing, again, like I talked earlier, but it's very individualized. Some people need a little more of that, boost, and some people need that tough love. And I think, she does a great job of it, but at the end of the day, she really is a compassionate and caring person, and she wants the best for everybody, and she's there for them in a heartbeat. And again, it might not always come across that way, like you said. I mean, people see things from the outside, but I think once you get on the inside, like, she'll have your back 110% every time. And she is very comforting. And I mean, she has been a great resource for me. And I know past coaches that have worked with her and past athletes, like alumni, they love her to death. And it is just, there's going to be the tough times, but there's the great times too. And I think that's really what it's about. It's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, like,
yeah. No, I mean, I had heard people, people had told me like, oh, she's kind of standoffish. And when I was on deck at Pac-12s, like, I thought she couldn't have been a warmer person in terms of somebody that like walked onto the pool deck and say, hey, how you doing today? And just, so there's people that ask you that question, and it's like a drive-by, like, hey, how you doing? Oh, okay, good. All right, see you later. She seemed like the type of person who's like, I really would like to know, how are you right now? And I could see that she was having that conversation all across the pool deck.
Yeah, she's all about relationships. Like, you just have to, I mean, I think with anybody, there can be a good time to try and strike a conversation and not a good time. Like, right. I've been that person that's like, all right, not right now. Yeah. But I mean, again, I would say, like, she wants to get to know people. She wants to talk. She's a lifelong learner. Like, she wanted to be a teacher. So if you have an idea, like, I mean, Milt, like, that's where the two of them together is like, oh my God. Sometimes they're the craziest ideas. And then when it clicks, you're like, oh my God, this is genius. And, like, that's what that's what I've also appreciated about her is, I mean, she's been coaching for as long as she has, and she'll still come to me for like asking for ideas and asking for help, and her willingness to just reach out and listen to the team. Like, if something's not going well, like, again, you said after that relay, we sat together as a team, was like, all right, what can we do? Yeah. It's not just like, we're doing what Terry wants to do. Like, she is very collaborative, and she's very much willing to hear people out, again, with the idea that it's the best interest of the team and the best interest of, like, the more she knows, the better.
Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of courage to coach that collaboratively. Like, I think that I know that the higher level that I got to, the more I felt pressured that I had to somehow exert my will on what was happening, and I think it really does take some as I say, courage or bravery or whatever you want to call it, to just be able to like bring people into the process and have it be something that, you know, you're doing one-to-one or one to a big group or a group working together. So, okay, the last thing I want to ask you about, Dani, is recruiting. And you mentioned off the top, you got 14 freshmen coming in. So something is going really well in terms of recruiting. I haven't looked at the full list of 14, but you know, I think that I know some of the highlights of it. So I know there's a lot of excitement going on there. I'm really curious because you know, Virginia has just won their national championship. And I think we've seen on the college landscape, Virginia and NC State be very, very successful in recruiting. Their recruiting style, I don't even know how to describe it, but like, because I only hear about it secondhand, right? You know, like if somebody who's from Denmark wants to come over to the U.S., like I usually hear about their recruiting trip to NC State or whatever, and I could assume that Todd has taken some of that stuff over to Virginia. What kind of stuff are you doing at Cal to be competitive in recruiting, and you know, compete with other schools at the top? What kind of stuff do you think is probably similar, and what do you think that maybe you're doing that is not taking place elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year obviously was very different since it's all been virtual. Yeah. But I think
the answer to every one of these questions is like, well,
this year we're not
kind
gonna,
of a weird year for this, but I know. But
in general, like the 14, I think the biggest piece for us is just finding the right people. And I think once we can get people on campus, I think Cal sells itself. It's a gorgeous school. Everything's outside. You're seeing people, you know, all day long. So I think just that environment is something that, like I said, relationships are really important to us. And so just getting that sense of community and getting them on campus, I think is the biggest thing for us. And we also, I'll be honest, like we don't pressure anybody into making a commitment to Cal. I can't speak to how other schools do it, but
so you don't give anybody, so just to explain to people, so you don't have to, like, you don't get anybody on the phone. You go, we'll give you, you know, set $30,000 a year to go. But if you hang up the phone, like that offer's gone. You don't do that.
No.
Okay.
We tell people, we want you, here's what we can offer you. And you let us know when you've made a decision. And if you need to have a further conversation about what that offer is, we are totally open to having that conversation and see if we can, you know, work things out. Because if Cal's where you want to be and we want you, we want to make it happen. But we're not going to give you a time window. We're not going to give you, you know, which, you know, it could be good, it could be bad. But I mean, I think that's also kind of how it works when you're here. Like we said, we put the accountability on the team and we want that collaboration, and we don't want to pressure anybody into making a decision. We want them to come to Cal knowing that this was their choice and they exhausted all of their resources and did their homework. Because again, I think that affects the culture once they're here. So, you know, pressure might sound great in the moment, but for us, that's not really what we're about. We want the people here that want to be here, and that's going to look different for everybody. Yeah. But again, I think our process is we want people to know they're wanted and, you know, put it on them to decide if this is what they want to, and not make it more of a one-way street.
I think what you're pointing at, though, there's sort of like two sides of a coin here. And I thought about this a lot when I was last a college coach, which now has been 8 years. So it's, you know, it's almost ancient history in terms of college swimming and stuff. But, you know, like I was at Georgia Tech and I was recruiting, and it was sort of like, you could look at recruiting as, how can I convince the best possible athletes to come to Georgia Tech? That's sort of one recruiting approach. And then I think the recruiting approach that you're referring to is, how can I find the best possible athletes who actually want to, like, who's the best thing for them would be to come to Cal. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, that, like, for instance, I would look for kids at Georgia Tech, because particularly, like, it basically almost was pointless to be a liberal arts major, but you know, people who really wanted to study biomedical engineering, I knew like, hey, this is a great option for you. Like you're going to be really happy here regardless of how fast you swim. And oh, by the way, though, the fact that you're really happy that you're going here, like that will help you to be more successful in swimming. And I kind of think that to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, sort of sounds a little bit more like what you guys are trying to do in the recruiting process. And
yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of Terry having been here so long and having been so successful. She knows what type of person it's going to take. And she's very upfront, like Cal's not for everybody. And that's okay. And that's where we're going to be transparent if we don't feel someone's the right fit for Cal, regardless of how fast you are. And we want the same of that individual, because if you get here and it's going to be a struggle, that's not helpful to the individual or to the team. So it really is just trying to take our time. And that's where we don't want to pressure anybody. Like take your time and learn, is this the place for you? Because it is a pretty non-traditional program. But that's something we take pride in. And if somebody's not excited by that, then again, regardless of how fast you are, that might not be the best fit. I mean, thankfully we've had very talented women who, want to be a part of it. And I think also we can hang our hat on. We've had a lot of women like vastly improved when they've been at Cal. Mm-hmm. And so like, again, that national championship relay, Izzy was the only one who had ever been to nationals before. So, just seeing women improve, and they're the ones that buy in. And so it is just trying to, pinpoint those characteristics when they're a recruit. But again, a junior in high school can change a lot from being a junior in high school to a freshman in college. So, just keeping that in mind as well is why we also don't want to rush it. I mean, somebody can change a lot and values can change and, things like that. So we just want to take the time, like you said, and just find the right people for Cal. It doesn't have to be the fastest. That's always a great attribute, is if you swim really fast. But there's a lot more to yes, we are in the business of, wanting to be the best, but there's more to it than just swimming fast. And that's what we're really trying to work on in our recruiting.
Well, I really appreciate all that you've shared with me here. I think you were willing to face down some tough questions, and with not a lot of time to prepare for them. So my hat's off to you, Dani. I remain a fan, and thanks for being willing to come on here and talk through some of this with me.
You're welcome. Glad to be here, and thanks for having me.